Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
On our 20th wedding anniversary, my husband handed me a vacuum cleaner, smirked like he'd just solved the world's problems, and said, "You should be thankful anyone still wants you." I don't know what's more ridiculous, the fact that he thought a vacuum was a gift, or that he thought I should be grateful for still being tolerable in his eyes. I remember just standing there, holding that box like it was some cursed object, while he went right back to watching ESPN with a beer in hand, like it was any other Wednesday night. There was no dinner, no card, not even a damn cupcake. Just the hum of that stupid sports commentator in the background, and my heartbeat thudding somewhere between rage and numbness. I didn't cry. Not that night. I smiled, kissed his cheek, said, "Thanks, babe," and went upstairs. He probably thought I was going to plug it in and test it out, or whatever twisted version of gratitude he had mapped out in that hollow little head of his. But I didn't. I went into the guest bathroom, shut the door, and sat on the cold tile for a long time. And not because I was sad. Not really. No, I was calculating. You don't spend 2 decades with someone like Todd Lawson without learning how to be quiet, how to observe, how to wait. Todd always liked to think he was the smartest one in the room. Hell, he liked to think he was the room, and I was just something that filled the space. I don't think he even noticed the shift that night. The way I started smiling just a little too sweetly. The way I stopped asking him about his day. The way I kissed him without touching him. He didn't notice because people like Todd never do, not until it's too late. When I married Todd, I was 27, bright-eyed, and convinced we were partners. We both had good jobs, a fixer-upper house we were proud of, and all the promise of a life built together. But over the years, that together part faded. At first, it was little things, jokes at my expense during dinner parties, eye rolls when I asked for help with the kids, the way he'd suddenly be busy every time I had a family emergency. Then came the criticisms. The slow drip of disapproval. "You've really let yourself go, Ratch. Why don't you dress up like you used to? You should be lucky I'm still around. Most guys would have walked." But I didn't walk. I endured. Because of the kids. Because of the mortgage. Because I thought maybe it was just a rough patch. Because I kept telling myself I was strong enough to handle it. I had a part-time job as a copy editor and kept the household afloat while he gallivanted off to business trips and late meetings that always seemed to end with him stumbling in after midnight. I stopped asking questions a long time ago. But I started watching. The thing about Todd is, he's not that clever. He thinks he's James Bond, but he's more like a bad daytime soap character who forgot to cover his tracks. The late-night texts he thought I didn't see. The charge on our shared card from that spa that definitely doesn't do massages for men. The unfamiliar scent on his coat that wasn't my perfume, too floral, too young, too desperate. And the way he started guarding his phone like it held national security secrets. I didn't need to snoop. Todd practically begged me to catch him. But the vacuum was the turning point. That's when I realized he didn't just stop loving me. He didn't see me anymore. I was a glorified maid, a placeholder, a name on a tax return. And maybe I'd let it get there. Maybe I'd stayed too long hoping the man I married would reappear. But that night, on our 20th anniversary, while he clicked the remote and popped open a second beer, something inside me flipped like a light switch. I went into our shared office and opened a private folder on my laptop. I titled it The Plan. That's when I started taking notes, dates, receipts, screenshots, locations. I pulled bank statements. I downloaded text records. I began to chart out everything. This wasn't rage. It was something colder, more precise. It felt like control. For the first time in years, I wasn't reacting. I was planning. 3 days later, I found myself downtown, walking past a little cafe I used to love. I hadn't been there in years. But I stopped short because sitting by the window, clear as day, was Todd. He was laughing, hand resting on a tan thigh that was definitely not mine, leaning in too close to a woman who looked like she just stepped out of a sponsored Instagram post. She couldn't have been older than 30. Tall, fake lashes, cropped yoga top, sipping on a matcha latte like her life was sponsored by Lululemon. And there he was, Todd Lawson. Mr. No one wants you anymore, grinning like a horny teenager and feeding this woman bites of his pastry. Her hand was in his lap. His phone was on the table, unlocked. I stood across the street, watching them through the window. I didn't feel hurt. Not anymore. I felt detached, like I was watching someone else's bad movie. So I pulled out my phone and snapped a photo. Then I walked closer, not inside, just close enough to be seen. I made sure the sunlight hit my face just right. I looked right at him. And when Todd glanced up and saw me, his expression froze. I smiled slowly, like we were two old friends sharing an inside joke. That was day one of what I call the plan. When people ask me now why I stayed so long, I don't always know what to say, because it wasn't just one reason, it was 1,000 small ones tied together with years of habit and excuses and fear that somehow, even after everything, I was the problem. It started with little things, things that didn't seem worth fighting about, comments that stung but passed quickly, moments where I questioned myself more than I questioned him. Todd had a way of dressing up cruelty and charm, of making it sound like concern, like humor, like truth. I still remember the first time he told me I was getting soft around the edges. We were at his boss's housewarming party, and I'd worn this navy dress I'd always loved. It hugged in the right places, or at least I thought it did. As we stepped inside, he leaned in and whispered, "Next time we go out, let's find something a little more forgiving." Then he kissed my forehead and smiled like he'd said something sweet. I laughed it off then, but I went home that night and threw that dress in the back of the closet. I haven't worn it since. Over the years, that became a pattern. He never yelled. He never hit. But he chipped away at me, inch by inch, year after year, until I didn't recognize myself in the mirror. My hair was always too frizzy, my thighs were a problem, my job was cute, but didn't really count because it wasn't real work. At dinner parties, he'd correct me when I shared stories, adding details that didn't exist, then mocking me if I protested. "She's got a terrible memory," he'd say with a wink. "It's adorable." It wasn't adorable. It was humiliating. And I let it happen for 20 years. No, wait, 22. Wait. No, God, that's not right. We got married in April of 2003, so, crap, 20. Just 20. It felt like 22. Maybe 27 if you count the emotional mileage. Anyway, after I saw him at the cafe with Yoga Barbie and that smug little smirk on his face, I went home, poured myself a glass of wine, and stared at the ceiling for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't throw things. I sat there, calmly planning, thinking through what I'd already known in my gut. This wasn't just a bad marriage. This was a man who believed he'd won. He thought he'd trained me, conditioned me, taught me how to be small enough to stay. That's when I called Carla Santiago. Janine had recommended her about a year earlier, during one of our wine nights, when I'd casually asked what it would take to leave someone like Todd. Carla wasn't just an attorney. She was a professional shark in heels. She took one look at me across her desk, coffee in one hand, red nails tapping against her iPad, and said, "You don't look broken. You look bored." That's good. Bored women are the dangerous ones. I told her everything. The comments, the cheating, the control, the indifference. She nodded like she'd heard it all before, and I'm sure she had, and told me to start documenting everything. Gather receipts. Texts, calls, bank statements, whatever you can get your hands on. And for God's sake, she said, play dumb. You start flipping tables now and he'll lawyer up before you get a chance to breathe. So I went home and played dumb. Smiled when he came in late. Laughed at his jokes. Acted surprised when he said he was flying to Dallas for work even though he hates Dallas and his company doesn't even have an office there. I started tracking his flights, his card usage, his phone pings. I bought a cheap burner phone and used it to store everything. I gave it a cute little wallpaper, a beach sunset, just in case he ever saw it. He never did. I also started asking questions I already knew the answers to. Like, babe, did you move that cash from the savings? Or, hey, What's this $482 charge to Wellness Empire? He'd blink, look annoyed, then tell some half-baked story about spa packages for his team or needing a massage for back pain. I nodded, jotted it down in my file, and kissed his cheek like a good little housewife. And then I did something else. I went into his Tesla app and disabled the internal camera system. You know, the ones that record the cabin when he's driving. He had no idea it even existed. But I did. I'd helped him set it up. So I wiped it clean, just in case things got messy later on. Wouldn't want any unnecessary recordings showing up during discovery, now would we? That night, he came home smelling like takeout and cheap perfume. Some god-awful blend of fried rice and fake vanilla that clung to his coat. There was a pink lipstick smudge just under his collar, and he looked surprised when I didn't ask about it. Instead, I handed him a napkin, kissed his cheek again, and said, "Long day." He nodded, mumbling something about a stressful client call, and headed upstairs. I stood there in the kitchen, hands still on the counter, listening to his footsteps fade down the hall. And I smiled again, that same smile from the cafe. Because little did he know, while he was upstairs checking his burner phone for love notes from Brittany or Becky or whoever it was this week, I was downstairs rewriting the script of our marriage. I wasn't just collecting evidence. I was building a case. And soon, I'd make damn sure he knew just how real the work of a cute little copy editor could get. The beautiful thing about living with a liar is that once you stop trying to convince them to tell the truth, you suddenly have all the space in the world to just sit back and watch. And Todd, God bless him, had started getting sloppy, probably because he thought he'd broken me down to the point where I didn't even see anymore, let alone care. But I wasn't just watching. I was documenting, gathering, building. While he was busy running around playing high school boyfriend with women who thought emotional depth meant crying at the end of a yoga retreat, I was in the shadows, taking notes with a pen sharp enough to slice a man clean in half. It started with a second phone, a cheap one, prepaid, stashed inside the old toolbox in the garage that hadn't been touched since the Bush administration. I found it on a Tuesday afternoon, wedged behind a rusted wrench set and a crusty roll of electrical tape. I was cleaning out the garage, or at least pretending to, when I spotted it. I picked it up, pressed the power button, and sure enough, it buzzed to life. No lock screen. No password. The man might be smug, but he wasn't smart. Inside were messages. Lots of them. Mostly from someone named Britt. The texts were a horror show of bad grammar, worse sexting, and the kind of emoji abuse that should be illegal past the age of 30. There were heart eyes, peaches, eggplants, and my personal favorite, one that read, "Can't wait to stretch you out again," smirking face. I remember staring at that particular gem and thinking, dear God, is this what I gave 20 years of my life to? Of course, it didn't stop there. Oh no, the best part was the Venmo. I logged into our joint account, something he'd apparently forgotten I still had access to, and found recurring payments to someone named Brittany R., labeled things like yoga upside down face and wellness times smiling face with halo. Subtle as a wrecking ball. I took screenshots of everything, including the one that said, "Thanks for last night, eggplant fired." That one almost made me laugh out loud. Almost. Now, I could have confronted him right then and there. I could have printed it all out, slammed it on the dinner table, and screamed until my voice went hoarse. But where's the fun in that? I didn't want to just catch him. I wanted to twist the knife slowly, surgically, with style. So I started leaving little breadcrumbs. I sprayed a new perfume in my car, something musky, bold, nothing like my usual lavender scent. I left a men's razor in the downstairs bathroom. I sent myself flirty texts from a fake number I made using a texting app, then left my phone open just long enough for him to catch a glimpse of a message that said, "Last night was amazing, face-lowing kiss, can't wait to see you again." That one nearly made him trip over the dog bowl. Janine was all in on the plan. God, I love that woman. She's the kind of friend who won't just help you bury the body, she'll bring snacks and wine and a shovel. So she helped me arrange a chance run-in between Todd and a man named Marcus, who happened to be a handsome, gym-going acquaintance of her cousin. Marcus's job was simple, bump into Todd at the gas station, drop a hint about Rachel's new friend, and flash just enough charm to rattle him without making it obvious. And boy, did it rattle him. Todd came home that night acting all casual, but his eyes were bouncing around like a Roomba trapped in a corner. He asked me if I'd been out more lately, said it like he was just being conversational. I smiled, stirred the pasta sauce, and said, "I've been doing some new things, keeping busy." After that, he started watching me. Real subtle, too, pretending to check the thermostat when he was actually trying to see who I was texting, asking if I needed a ride when I went to the store, randomly appearing in the garage while I worked out. He even offered to go to yoga with me. Yoga, the man who once said, "Stretching is for hippies," was suddenly down-dogging his way through suspicions. But here's the kicker. Even as he started unraveling, getting paranoid, pacing the house like he was waiting for the other shoe to drop, he still couldn't help being smug. That's the thing about men like Todd. They think they're invincible. Even when the ship is sinking, they believe they'll float. So one night, we're sitting on the couch, him fake laughing at a sitcom he's not watching, and out of nowhere, he turns to me and says, "You aren't planning to leave me, right?" I looked him right in the eyes, heart steady, lips curved just enough to make him wonder. And I said, "Oh honey, why would I ever do that?" There's a unique kind of satisfaction that comes from watching a man publicly unravel while wearing the same smug face he's worn through years of quiet cruelty, as though he can't quite grasp that the walls have finally closed in, and that this time, there's no getting out with a charming apology or a gaslighting spin about how you misunderstood everything. The day we served Todd the papers wasn't just about legal closure, it was about reclaiming my own narrative, the one he'd tried to rewrite for 2 decades with every subtle insult, every shrug of indifference, every underhanded jab wrapped in a joke that only he found funny. It was a bright Thursday morning, one of those perfect suburban days that practically scream, "Nothing bad happens here," birds chirping, people sipping overpriced coffee, and couples pretending their relationships weren't quietly disintegrating under years of built-up resentment. The cafe was one of those trendy little spots on Main Street with succulents in mason jars and baristas who looked like they'd rather die than spell your name right. Todd loved the place. Said it made him feel young again. Said Brittany liked the turmeric lattes, which should have been a red flag on its own. I'd timed it perfectly, of course. Carla and I had been tracking his patterns for weeks. Thursday mornings were always client breakfast meetings, and yet somehow, the same blonde ponytail kept showing up in the same seat across from him. Brittany. Sweet, stretchy, 29-year-old Brittany, who thought my husband was emotionally mature because he remembered her birthday and took her to a wine tasting once. The bar is in hell. I didn't dress to kill that morning. No, that would have been too easy, too expected. I dressed like myself. The self he forgot I had, the woman who knew how to wield silence like a blade, who wore confidence like perfume. Jeans, boots, a leather jacket I hadn't worn since before the kids were born. Hair up. No makeup. Just clarity. Carla met me 2 blocks away, already tapping on her phone with military precision, wearing black heels and a grin that could curdle milk. Behind her, 2 process servers leaned against a car like bouncers outside a nightclub. Suits sharp, energy casual, the kind of guys who'd ruined other men's lives before breakfast and didn't even need coffee to do it. We walked in together, slow and deliberate, like we had all the time in the world. The little bell above the cafe door chimed, and for a second, Todd didn't even look up, too busy twirling a spoon between his fingers while Brittany giggled like someone who thought she was safe. But then he saw me. His eyes locked onto mine, and I watched the color drain from his face like someone had pulled a plug. He opened his mouth, maybe to lie, maybe to laugh, maybe to tell me I was being crazy. But before he could say a word, Carla stepped forward and dropped the envelope on the table like it was just the check arriving early. One of the servers leaned in and said calmly, "You've been served," like he was offering a refill. Brittany blinked, confused, fingers still wrapped around Todd's. And then, the man, my husband, the father of my children, the king of passive aggression, exploded. He jumped up, voice rising, saying I was being dramatic, saying I was overreacting, saying that I was trying to ruin his life over a little mistake. He said I had no right to ambush him like this, that I'd always been unstable, that I'd never really been happy. Then he leaned in, too close, too furious, and hissed, "This is why I had to find someone else. You let yourself go. You stopped being fun." The entire cafe went silent. Forks paused midair. Conversations froze. And I just stood there, hands in my pockets, tilting my head the way you do when a child says something so profoundly stupid that you have to double-check if you heard it right. Then I took one slow breath and smiled. "You're right, Todd," I said, voice low but steady enough to cut marble. "I did let something go. I let you go. I let go of the weight of pretending you were someone worth staying for. I let go of shrinking myself so your ego could stretch. I let go of waiting for you to remember I was more than the woman who did your laundry and bit her tongue while you played the victim." He tried to talk again, tried to raise his voice, but Carla raised one finger and said calmly, "Anything else you say here can be brought into court. I'd suggest you sit down and drink your matcha." The servers were still watching. Brittany was now tearing up, smearing mascara with a napkin, looking between us like she'd just walked into a movie halfway through and didn't know which character she was supposed to root for anymore. And then I leaned in just a little, just enough that only he could hear, and whispered, "Oh, sweetheart, she doesn't know half of it yet. The thing no one tells you about starting over at 47 is that it doesn't feel like some sweeping, triumphant movie moment where you stand in front of a mirror, cut your hair, throw out your ex's clothes, and suddenly remember how to dance again. It feels more like waking up in a quiet house you don't recognize, surrounded by cardboard boxes that still smell like someone else's life, and realizing that, for the first time in decades, every decision from here on out is yours and yours alone. There's fear in that, sure, but there's power too, and that power tastes a hell of a lot like Pinot Noir on a Tuesday night." After Todd's very public meltdown at the cafe, Carla wasted no time getting the paperwork pushed forward. She was like a bloodhound with a law degree, relentless and unapologetic in the way only a woman who's seen hundreds of Todd types could be. Within 2 weeks, the ball was rolling so fast he didn't even have time to spin his usual web of excuses before finding himself knee-deep in mandatory disclosures, asset valuations, and supervised visitation hearings. Meanwhile, I moved in with Janine, who offered me the spare bedroom in her split-level rental like she'd been preparing for this exact moment for years. The house was small, with creaky stairs and mismatched furniture, but it felt warm in a way I hadn't experienced in years. We made pasta at midnight, drank wine straight from the bottle, and cackled like teenagers over the sheer stupidity of some of Todd's texts, which I still kept neatly organized in a digital folder labeled Exhibit A through Z. Carla called it the most thorough personal archive she'd ever seen. I called it insurance. Todd, of course, didn't take the quiet loss well. Men like him rarely do. They don't just fear losing control, they can't comprehend it. So he did what I knew he would. He turned into the victim. He started calling mutual friends, spinning tales about how I was going through something, about how he still loved me but couldn't save me. As if I were a charity case instead of the woman who made his life look respectable for 2 decades while he ran around acting like a frat boy in a midlife crisis. Some friends bought it. The ones who had always quietly admired his golf game and thought his arrogance was confidence. But most of the women? They saw through it. And they saw through Brittany too. That little fantasy didn't last long. A month after the cafe incident, Brittany was out. Packed her things, left his house, and, according to Janine's very resourceful cousin who works at the pharmacy, slapped him across the face in the parking lot after finding out he'd been sending late-night messages to someone named Melissa on Snapchat. Yes, Snapchat. The man is 51 years old and still out here using apps designed for teenagers trying to sneak past their parents. He told her it was just emotional support, which is probably the dumbest version of cheating I've ever heard. Meanwhile, Carla was dismantling him in court. Line by line, she laid out his financial inconsistencies, his inappropriate communications during work hours, the texts, the receipts, the Venmo payments to women listed as coaching sessions with peach and flame emojis. The judge didn't even blink. By the end of it, Todd lost primary custody, agreed to a very generous spousal support arrangement, and had to sell his precious golf membership to pay his legal fees. His face when the gavel hit was something I'll carry with me until the day I die. And the wildest part? I wasn't even angry anymore. Somewhere between that cafe confrontation and the court ruling, the anger just fizzled out. I thought I'd be burning with vengeance for years, but it turns out that real revenge isn't fire. It's peace. It's the kind of silence that fills your lungs like oxygen after you've been drowning for so long you forgot what breathing felt like. Now I spend my days editing from Janine's sunroom, sipping coffee with cinnamon, watching birds fight over the feeder like it's their own courtroom drama. I see my kids on weekends and they seem lighter, like they're no longer walking on eggshells. My daughter told me I laugh more now. My son hugged me without prompting. It's the little things that make it real. The night before last, I opened a bottle of wine, curled up under a fleece blanket I bought just for myself. No shared decisions, no "do we really need this?" conversations, and I sat there thinking about everything I'd survived. 20 years of shrinking, of silencing myself, of pretending I didn't know what I knew. 20 years of being the support beam in someone else's hollow temple. And now? Now I get to be the architect of my own damn life. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Todd. It read, "I miss you. Can we talk sometime? I'm sorry." No punctuation. Just those 3 lines, like he thought that was enough to unravel everything I'd built since the moment I kissed his cheek and started planning his downfall. I didn't reply. I didn't even delete it. I just stared at it for a moment, set the phone down, and took another long sip of wine. But maybe I will reply. Not today. Not this week. But eventually. Because, the thing is, I still have one more card to play.